My tears turn to laughter, that child long ago. My soul starts to linger, it's home I know. If you catch me daydreaming now and forever, thoughts are carrying me along to that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we roam. Whenever I go to that place I know it'll always be home, home to me.
Bustle, disorder and chaos, boisterous and always busy.
Hello, I'm Harvey Kirk. This is Kensington Market. Come and experience one of the most colorful historical neighborhoods in the city of Toronto.
Through the decades, for some new arrivals to Canada, it has been a welcoming ground. For others, a stopping-off place. For the most part, this area, at one time the western fringe of the city, became their permanent stake in a cosmopolitan frontier. Herein lives an irony. Street names transposed from Great Britain, College, Dundas, Bathurst, delineate the boundaries and arteries of downtown Toronto's Kensington district. Starting a new day of business, just as they have for years, are families and their descendants with surnames that speak of Eastern and Southern Europe. The contemporary neighborhood is a multicultural version of Leacock's Mariposa, ever so flamboyant in character. Each storefront, veranda, and alleyway has its individual story. Chapter 1 begins early this century with a wave of Jewish immigrants from Poland and Russia. In their baggage came century-old traditions and a survivalist determination. Many landed upon Toronto the Good, as it liked to be called, a metropolis where 90% of its citizens claimed British roots. The merchant focus was on Lower Yonge Street, where some, like the T. Eaton organization, maintained a near monopoly of the clothing industry. Lighting on the shoulders of the established hierarchy, most of the new arrivals sought out jobs in the garment manufacturing houses further west on King. At Spadina Avenue, the creative yet volatile hub called the Fashion District grew. It became a surrogate Jewish homeland. For some, whose entrepreneurial spirit meant independence, the neighboring streets spelled opportunity.
Excluded from the existing business community, they opened stalls while they sold their wares on the streets. Eventually, some of them parked their carts at their front door, and that's where it all began. In the decades since, Kensington Market has come to mean various things to many people. What this wall-to-wall mercantile menagerie really is pretty hard to describe. It's more of an experience.
Today, the people of Kensington claim multi-ethnic roots. Shopping on a Saturday morning, or any day for that matter, can be akin to Gulliver's Travels, a voyage into an imagined land, riding the high seas of color, music, and dialect. Besides food for the table, one comes away with nourishment for the soul. Here on the Kensington pavement is bred a spirit of tolerance you don't always find. Folks reason that it is because most of its residents have worn the cap of immigrant themselves. The area is traditional in that respect. Jews were soon joined by Italians and Slovaks, and the trend carries on. Protocol in this festive microcosm suggested that an introduction to royalty was of the first order. I plotted a careful introduction to Francis Bourg, whose son Sal carries on the family tradition. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine.
Good to see you. You're the Queen of Kensington, right?
That's right.
Should I curtsy?
Where did this Queen of Kensington title come from?
I really don't know. Just happened.
I've been out on the street there. I've heard it several times. Go see the Queen of Kensington.
Well,
You must
maybe
know.
I'm a large figure and I walk around, you know, tall and straight, and they say, "Who's that?"
That's the Queen of Kensington.
That's right.
I have a picture here of you as a teenager. You're selling bananas. Tell me about that.
That's right. That's all we did sell. We were known as the Italian banana store.
Well, were you the boss when this picture was taken?
Well, not in that picture, but what happened was, you know, after high school, in those days they didn't believe in, well, they did believe in going to university, but why would a girl want to go to university? So after
yes.
2 years of high school and being 16, if you weren't smart by that time, you'd never be smart. And that's what my dad said anyway. So I was always working in the store and helping out in the wholesale bananas. And my dad died suddenly, overnight. And here I was with my mom and my sister and in this business, and I just automatically took over. It was a big responsibility, but when you have to do things, you do it.
Were you doing that yourselves, your own family, or did you have employees?
Yes, we had 2 drivers and 2 trucks.
You must have been one of the first women in business in the city,
Well, maybe, but
running the business, I mean.
that's right. See, I was liberated. In those days, liberated mean, well, go to work and work, and
If you worked, you were liberated?
that's right. Nowadays, they think it's a big thing, but it's not. All it means is you can go out to work.
You were an Italian family in the middle of a Jewish market. How did that work?
Everybody used to say, how could you get along? I mean, you're surrounded by Jews. But we got along famously.
Everybody seems to get along here.
That's right. I think that's one of the trades of the market.
Getting along. You see what I mean? It's the spirit of the place. Well, in this Mariposa delight, I was soon to discover the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, long-term merchants in this fiefdom, the Baldwin Street boys.
How are you? Oh, this is Harvey Kirk. How are you?
What's your name?
I'm Jackie Gelman.
Hi, Jackie.
This is Sonny Silverstein.
Nice to meet you.
Ronnie Dater.
Ronnie?
And this is Izzy Katz.
You're the fish market man.
Yeah,
That's right, that's right.
How long has this
You
store been
decided
around?
yourself? And Max was the original owner.
Yeah.
Solly is the son. Max has retired. So, and they've been here since 1955.
Babies.
Babies. My father was selling cabbages outside in 1928. He couldn't afford to rent a store, so the storekeeper.
$3 a month.
Yes, he would
$3 a
rent them.
month.
He would rent them. The outside,
For a
I think it
dollar.
was for 50 cents a month.
Probably.
I'm telling you. But this was
All the
going back.
cabbage you could eat.
Yeah, till 1928, till 1928, 29.
This actually was an upscale area at the time. All these storefronts you see were not here. They were cottages.
They were all
And it was an
houses.
Anglo-Saxon area.
Yeah.
And then Jewish immigrants started to come in from Eastern Europe, and they bought these cottages and tacked on storefronts, like ours was.
Right.
Yeah.
Ours was a cottage in the back. And
Right.
they tacked the storefront on.
Yeah.
Just like they're doing now in Chinatown on
Yeah.
on Dundas Street and on Broadview and Gerrard and Dundas
Yeah.
and Huron area.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Well, my father had the grocery store down the street and used to be a living room.
We all lived in back
Right.
of the
We
shop.
lived in the back or upstairs.
Yeah, in the back and
Yeah.
upstairs.
And that started when all the immigrants came between the wars there in the
Yeah,
20s.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in the middle
30s.
20s and in the 30s.
Yeah, my father hit here in a good year, 1929.
Yeah.
by a good year.
That's the early crash. I was born the day before the crash, October 28th, 1929.
That's why there was the crash the next day.
Yes, that was the last
was
good
it.
thing that happened. After that, everything was downhill.
Well, not quite downhill. The Baldwin Street boys reunite every year, celebrating a strength of household unity, the continuing force binding the Kensington extended family. The lifeblood of all North American cities depends on the residential growth within the downtown core. This is the town within the city that is the neighborhood of Kensington. A place of children, church, and change. Much like Toronto of old, it has had to adapt to varying social patterns. The old Jewish market, as Kensington was labeled for 40 years, was to see a new cultural influence in the 1950s. Lorne Brown, teacher and historian.
When the Portuguese came, the area was beginning to show its age, actually. It was getting a little down in the heels. And well, Portuguese love bright colors, and they would paint up their houses in very bright colors, very bright primary reds and blues and yellows, greens. And the total effect is quite pleasing when you stand in front of a whole row of houses with all these wonderful colors on them. And you can clearly see the pride that they took in their houses, too. And they're great gardeners, and there would be a postage-size lawn in front of their house or whatever was there. Well, they would grow vegetables, or they would have wonderful gardens or whatever. The houses are quite close together and in a certain sense almost row housing, but they don't look that way because each house is unique. It has its own characteristic, and it may just be that the gable on top of this house has a certain kind of carving, and on top of another house it's a different kind of carving, but it's enough to make them different. Once upon a time, Kensington was an orchard, and there was a little creek flowing through. It was a very sylvan setting back in the 1800s. Russell Creek still flows underneath the streets of Kensington somehow or other. It's probably part of the sewer system, but it still flows there. And there's a legend in Kensington that the last bear that was ever shot in Toronto was shot just by Russell Creek on Bellevue.
As in the growth of any small community, certain landmarks take on a special meaning. In the hearts and minds of generations living in the district is an unusual character, Old Fire Hall Number 8. Its role always central in the life of Kensington.
The fire hall, of course, had firefighting equipment in it, and it was pulled by horses. They didn't have fire trucks as we know them today. Every night at 6 o'clock, the bell would ring, and this was a signal for the people who lived in Kensington to come out and promenade on Bellevue, talk to their neighbors, and watch the horses being exercised out of the fire hall. And they had a special drill, and the horses would come out and would stand still while all the harness was dropped on them very quickly so they could, if this was a real fire, they could get away in a hurry.
Horses and firemen charging down neighboring streets answering alarms became folk heroes. Their task to extinguish blazes erupting in the tinderbox of earlier period frame dwellings. It was one fateful night in 1972 that the tides were turned. The community gathered to watch in horror as flames engulfed old number 8.
My wife and I and the two girls drove down to Kensington, and it was an incredible sight. This was late at night, and College Street was blocked off because this was a major fire going on. The flames were shooting up this hose tower like a Roman rocket. But the thing about it was the street was filled with people from the area, and many of them were crying. Like this affected them emotionally. This is our station burning down. And I've never forgotten that scene. The firefighters came from all over the city because for them too, the number 8 station was an important thing for them. And so they phoned each other in the middle of the night and said, number 8 station's burning. And they came from all over. And they put the fire out. And I think it was Chief Bonser, he's now chief of the fire department. He told me afterwards, he said, you know, by all rules and regulations of firefighting manuals, and if we'd done this correctly, we would have let that thing burn because we knew it would be dangerous when the fire was put out. It would probably have to be torn down anyway. So you let it burn, that wooden cupola would go. He said, I couldn't hold the men back. This was their station and it was burning. So they put the fire out, and in the cold light of dawn, they looked at it, and the bricks were weakened, and the structure was just terribly unsafe, so they tore the whole thing down. It was a very eerie time in Kensington's life. You'd look for the tower, it wasn't there. And a lot of people got together to make sure that when that was rebuilt, it was going to be rebuilt the same way that it was before, not some modern structure in there. So the tower came out like a phoenix, I guess, out of the ashes, and it's there still, modern, but looks like the old tower and still a symbol of Kensington.
Corner of the world is delegated the role of the artist to chronicle his or her environment. Subject and atmosphere are inhaled to be interpreted and exhaled in artistic expression. Peter Mateus is the chronicler of this community.
That's my neighbor, the missus with the Romanian spice lady. That's one of my signs, the peanut butter sign, actually, yeah.
He adapts 2 forms, both in paint. In the one instance, his signs are the message. In the other, the soul and character of the world of Kensington.
There's a little story with the boat, and it's a big red snapper there, yeah.
Peter, when did you come here?
Oh, about 1972, after I finished art school, I was looking for a studio, cheap enough, and ended up walking through the market and seeing all the fish. And in those days, there was ducks and geese and chickens. And
live ones?
Live ones on the street, and boxes and feathers flying and everything going on. So it was a colorful place, and it attracted me for that, as a painter, you know. And all the buildings are crooked and no wires and stuff out and stuff like that.
How many stores have your signs on them?
All of them.
Is that right?
I'm lying, of course, but all the latest ones.
Do you sell any of your paintings in the market?
On the street, I used to go right out in the middle of a snowstorm. I sold a bunch of paintings a few times.
Is that right?
Yeah, I would just put them out. Actually, I wanted to see what the people who come to the market think of what I'm painting, because I believed that what I was painting had a real character of the market. It wasn't an illustration or a certain style, and I wasn't just going through. I was part of the market after a while. I mean, I'm their sign painter, and I buy my fish from them. So,
so they buy paintings from you.
And they buy paintings from me. This is one of the fish guys, Jose Tavares. He came walking by, and he lived in a station wagon in a laneway. And I said, Jose, you got to come and sit for me. And so I grab a chair. He says, wait a minute, I'll be back in 7 minutes. Not 5, not 10, but 7. He went and got a jacket and put a kerchief there, and he sat for me right in the middle of the street while everything's going on. And what I like about it is his honor, his pride. This is a row of houses, which is now since torn down. And here was a Jamaican stranger, Cole, sells records and carpets.
Records and carpets.
Carpets. Here's used to be Tom's leather and pants, and Tom's moved.
I love
as we
that
can
sign
see.
that says Tom has moved.
That's my sign, of course. If they move, they gotta have my sign too. This is Louis of Kensington, my sign again. And this is old Louis here. He was he ran a coffee shop, bagels and small little soup to go and things like that. That was a standard. That was the market's breakfast spot, which is now the Greek restaurant, which is still the market's breakfast spot. So we go from Polish Jewish to Greek, and we're still having breakfast. Some of the characters who are sell and do business in different things, they're very much like what they sell. For example, the fish guys, you see them moving through the crowd. They're like fish weaving in a stream. And the chicken guys, you'll see them come out and stand in the street and put their hands in the apron, and they see each other, and then they'll turn their heads away. And it's like two chickens, the same thing. So I think this market is an endless resource of variety of people and how they interact and how they deal with what they sell. It shows very well. It's not a slick place. They're not up with the latest technology. They just, you know, it's old crates and milk cartons. It's probably most Silverwoods cartons in the whole world are in this market, you know? But they make it work, and that attracts me. I have a certain allegiance to this market and the people. And
I don't think you could live down here without having that kind of thing.
No, you
Could you?
No. You'd drive you crazy.
If you didn't like it, it would drive you crazy.
Yeah. Every day. To be there every day, yeah. There's a tremendous amount of tolerance and a very close-knit feeling between everybody who's here. And I think that is just the spirit of this market. That's what this market is about. And I think that it's actually a lesson in how people should get along. You know, I mean, if I'm an old man painting signs in this market, I wouldn't be surprised. And if all these awnings and those people are still there, I still wouldn't be surprised.
When you're painting, when you're an old man and painting signs, we'll be back. Talk to you again.
Yeah, that would be good. We will do that.
Okay.
I'll hold you to it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Getting along. That is the spirit of Kensington. And I came for groceries.